Hey co-stars, welcome to another episode of Generation Films. My name is British Ben, and recently a friend of mine sent me two documents, the Star Trek The Next Generation Writers and Directors Guide and the Star Trek The Next Generation Writers Technical Manual. And that technical manual would be an earlier version specifically for the writers of what would later become the official book that was released to the public. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in these two books, so I have been able to compile yet another top 10 Enterprise D video. So this is 10 things you never knew about the Enterprise D in Star Trek The Next Generation. Number 1. The true hero of the show. Now, the writer's guide points out that Picard and Riker are the two dual lead characters in the show. Most people would have thought that Picard, the most British Frenchman you've ever met,
Tea? Earl Grey, hot.
was the sole lead of the show, but this isn't true according to what the writers had planned early on. In the writer's guide, it's actually Picard and Riker are the kind of joint lead characters, and this is probably because there is another lead character in the show, and that is the ship herself. Yes, the Enterprise is actually the main character. Here's what it says in the writer's guide. Please remember that the major hero of Star Trek has always been the Enterprise and her mission. The ship is not just a vehicle, she is the touchstone by which all of our characters demonstrate who they are and what they are up to in the universe. If you watch episodes of the show, you do really get the feeling that the ship is a character. She's beautiful, but she can be temperamental sometimes.
Identify malfunction immediately.
Pawn to bishop 4. Knight to king's rook 3. Bishop to queen's bishop 4.
But you do feel empathy for her when she's harmed. Number 2. 8 times the size of the original Enterprise. The Enterprise D in the Next Generation is 640 meters or around 2,000 feet long, which makes it twice as long as the Enterprise in the original series and 8 times the size in terms of volume. The Enterprise D had 42 decks versus the either 21 to 27, depending on which source you use for the original Enterprise. The Galaxy-class Enterprise D at the time of its launch was the largest and most powerful Federation starship. It weighed 5 million metric tons, which makes it 27 times heavier than the largest container ship in the world, the OOCL Hong Kong. Number 3. It refueled every 3 years. In the writer's technical manual, it is outlined that the Enterprise D can carry enough antimatter and deuterium, the two fuels that it uses, for 3 years of operations, at which time it would have to refuel either at a starbase or by rendezvousing with a tanker. Surprisingly, this is a much shorter time than the nuclear submarines of today, which actually don't have to be refueled for decades. Some of them are even just filled up one time in the lifetime of the boat. The new class of submarines that the US Navy is having designed will only need to refuel every 40 years. The Enterprise D, however, did have some tricks up its sleeve. It could use the Bazard collectors on the front of the warp nacelles to pick up stray deuterium atoms in space. Then there was also an onboard antimatter generator that could generate small amounts of antimatter in a highly inefficient and matter-intensive process. Thus, it really was just regarded as a last resort. Number 4. Its top speed was 2 trillion miles per hour. The Enterprise D's top speed was warp 9.6, but it is written in the writer's technical manual that it could travel at warp 9.9 for a few minutes, with an automatic shutdown after 10 minutes. At that speed, the Enterprise would be traveling at 2.04 trillion miles per hour. It could go from Earth to the moon in a fraction of a second and cross our solar system in 13 seconds, but couldn't really go anywhere else because after 10 minutes, there's an automatic shutdown and they wouldn't have got anywhere meaningful yet. They'd just sort of be out floating in space. Even to travel to the nearest star is like 14 hours away. Man, space is big. Number 5. The ship's weapons had a huge range. Now, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the two main weapons of the Enterprise D, phasers and photon torpedoes. But what you might not know is that the range of these weapons is absolutely huge. Now, normally we think of space battles taking place kind of like this, where you're right next to the enemy ship. But the range of phasers and photon torpedoes was so great that a lot of battles would probably happen before the ships were even anywhere near each other. Phasers had a range of 300,000 kilometers. You can think of it as 23 Earths lined up next to each other. That distance is the range of the Enterprise's phasers. Then photon torpedoes had a range of 3.5 million kilometers, and photon torpedoes were smart weapons, kind of like the cruise missiles that we have today. They were capable of tracking a moving target and also making course corrections themselves after they had been launched. they could be launched individually or in spreads, with each torpedo locking onto a different target. So there were probably a lot of scenarios with photon torpedoes that we never got to see in the show, like firing one at a ship that was several million kilometers away, or hiding on one side of a planet and tracking a ship on the other side with a probe perhaps, and then firing a torpedo which then locks on once it gets within range and destroys the ship. Number 6. Saucer section warp coasting. Now, I am sure that you know the Enterprise can separate into two parts. I mean, they famously show it in the movie Generations, where the Enterprise crashes. Now, the saucer section does not have a warp core or warp nacelles of its own, so it is limited to sublight speeds, which would make it kind of like a sitting duck in battle. However, there is a section in the writer's manual that describes a warp coasting maneuver. When separation occurs at warp speed, the residual warp fields can take several minutes to fully collapse, so the primary hull can coast for some distance before it goes to sublight. So if the ship was going at warp 9.9, which it can do for under 10 minutes, and let's say that those residual warp fields didn't start to disperse until 2 minutes, it could potentially cross the solar system 13 times in that time, just warp coasting. All right, let's move on to the next one. Number 7, personal holodecks. Now, I'm sure you all know about the holodeck, that magical technology that allowed crew members to explore jungles, meet dead scientists, or act out Sherlock Holmes novels. Now, these holodecks were big rooms, the size of a gymnasium, that several people could enjoy together. And the computer could then employ holographic tricks to make people feel as if they were in a room much larger than they actually were. And then also force fields to create a kind of treadmill effect where you feel like you're covering a very large distance, but you're actually just walking on the spot with scenery changing around you. Well, in the writer's technical manual, they put forth the idea that in addition to these huge holodecks, the Enterprise also had personal holodecks which would serve as sort of like a treadmill just for one person. They give the example that the personal holodeck could be used to go jogging in Yosemite National Park. Now, although we never see these personal holodecks in the show, I kind of imagine that they would be the sort of thing that the VIP quarters would be equipped with. So VIPs visiting the ship would have a sort of personal exercise suite that they could use to go jogging. Of course, they probably wouldn't be equipped in every single crew quarter because holodecks use a lot of power, so I'm guessing it would just be for the VIPs. Number 8, faster than light computer. The writer's technical manual states that the ship's computer can process information at faster than light speeds. It uses a system of optical chips and fibers rather than electrical processing. And due to a network of subspace generators, that optical information can move at speeds faster than light. And this overcomes one of the main disadvantages of our current computer technology. That is, until we get quantum computers and they become sentient and they kill us all. Number 9. Tractor beams were powerful enough to tow an equal-sized vessel. The writer's technical manual also gives an outline of how powerful tractor beams are. For example, the Enterprise could not tow a small moon behind it.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
So yeah, there's no chance that the Enterprise could tow the Death Star. Now, the tractor beam had a maximum range of about 20,000 kilometers, so that's basically a little bit less than the size of 2 Earths next to each other, and a maximum weight of 10 million metric tons, but towing an object of that weight, it would have to be basically touching the Enterprise, okay? So if the ship were to pull something of, say, 5 million tons, that would be well within the weight limits. And guess what? The Galaxy-class starship is 5 million tons. So the Enterprise would have no problem towing another Galaxy-class or another Federation ship.
Attack those Federation starships, quickly!
Yeah, maybe it could pull those. I don't know how heavy they are. Number 10. A sneaky way to penetrate other ships' shields. This is a battle tactic outlined at the end of the writer's technical manual, and I don't ever recall seeing it on screen. Basically, how it works is that the Enterprise targets phasers at a point on an enemy ship's shield, which causes compression and a dimple to form. They then fire a photon torpedo, or many, and time it so the torpedo hits the shield just as the phaser beam extinguishes. This causes the shield to bounce back from its dimple and quickly expand around the torpedo, and when it explodes, it is within the shield, destroying the ship. Starfleet apparently tested this tactic with an out-of-date cruiser set for retirement that had been upgraded with the latest shields. Alright guys, thank you for watching this video. I didn't think I had enough information for yet another 10 features of the Enterprise video, but hey, here we are. And a big thank you to that friend of mine who is actually a student in our YouTube Viral Mastery program for sending me those books. And guys, if you want to do what we do, talk about fictional spaceships or any other topic for that matter on YouTube and make money doing it, you could also check out our YouTube Viral Mastery program. It's a course on how my business partner and I built 9 YouTube channels with over 2 million subscribers. It's been a heck of a ride thanks to you guys. So if you're an aspiring YouTuber, as a free preview of the course, just click below and check out our masterclass on how to start a 6-figure YouTube channel without making all the silly mistakes we've made along the way. Interested? Check out the details below. And guys, please subscribe to the channel if you're new. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.